Welcome back to another episode of My Counselor Live. We're so excited to spend the next little bit with you diving into a topic that is important to us here at My Counselor. My name is Anna McGuire, and I have the awesome opportunity of serving here on the team at MyCounselor.Online. This week, we have a very special guest, one of our members from our clinical team, the one and only Tara Riggs. Tara, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, Anna. So good to be with you. So I have been with the team here at MyCounselor.Online for about a year, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist in the state of Florida. I work out of our Navarre office in the panhandle of the state around Pensacola, that area. And I love being a part of this team. I love getting to serve our clients. And I love getting to do this from kind of a biblically and integrated point of view. So I love working for MCO and love being a clinician. Found and feeling so thankful that having just kind of found my calling and like feeling like, my place in the Lord's kingdom. So yeah.
That's so awesome. And one other really cool thing about you is that you were recently certified in EFT, which is, if you don't know what EFT is, it is emotionally focused therapy. Tell us a little bit about that certification and what that means.
Yeah. So for me, it means kind of everything. We go to grad school and we kind of there's just like this, like, there's so much to our field, right? And so very early on, I knew that I wanted to be a couples therapist. That was just like what I was drawn to. And so when I found EFT, which is kind of like the gold standard according to the APA for couples therapy, I just fell in love. I fell in love with the kind of the person-centered model, the emphasis on the attachment relationship and how important that is. And that's really how we're created. We're created to connect. We're created for connection. And so when I found this, I just fell in love. And so from the time that I was in grad school, for the past about 2.5 years, I've been kind of pursuing this path. It's a very kind of rigorous process, a lot of coursework, a lot of taping of your own sessions, a lot of feedback and supervision. And so finally was able to submit to get my application back in January. And then at the end of March, I got my results that I am now certified. And actually my certification actually just came in the mail this weekend. And I was kind of like, it brought back all of the wonderful feelings of that certification again. And so, it just means a ton to me, and just helps me feel really, really comfortable and confident in helping the couples that I serve.
That's so awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
And one thing that I do love about you and who it is that God's designed you to be as a therapist is that there is such a deep integration for your passion, that it is widespread. It's not just something you say, like, I'm passionate about this. Like, you see it flow out of the work that you do. And so you actually wrote an article recently, which I love the title of it. I want to say it like word for word because I think it's brilliant, is Game Night, the Not So Fun Games We Play in Marriage and How to Win Them, Part 1. And so this idea of the healthy relationships, couples counseling, again, you kind of dive into it here with your writing. And so tell us a little bit about who you wrote this article for.
Yeah, so the article is kind of mostly, I kind of wrote it for couples because there's lots of kind of games that we play in these relationships. So the thing is that all of us kind of have, every person kind of has the same set of needs in terms of we all need acceptance and belonging. We all need to know that we are loved just as we are. But because of the way that life has shaped us and sometimes like the deprivation of needs that we've actually experienced in life, we go about getting these needs met in a really kind of nasty way. And they, you hear people say like, don't play games with me, right? But the reason why we play those types of kind of nasty games is because we have a really basic need that's probably not getting met. And we've learned to get that need met using just like power and authority and control. And so we, it's a good thing, but we go about it in the wrong way.
So in your article, you use 3 illustrations of different games, quote unquote, that we play in marriage or in relationships. Can you talk about each one of those 3 games, which again, totally followed the imagery, the illustrations, they were so incredibly powerful.
So yeah, what this article is, or what that game in particular is about, is, whose fault is it anyway? It's this idea that we're always looking to like shift blame. That
Mm,
when it comes to somebody kind of pointing out our faults, we're always looking to kind of not be the one in the hot seat, right? Like, and we'd have a hard time taking responsibility. So what happens is someone brings something to our attention, and we're like, oh, well, I did that thing because you did this thing. And they can say, oh, well, I did that thing because you did this thing. And there's just kind of like, we kind of backstep all the way back, right? And it becomes this really kind of nasty cycle where no one actually owns anything and nothing ever changes. And
mm,
so, as long as that, and as long as we stay in that place, we are never able to actually make changes. If we constantly deflect, we can never reflect, right?
ooh, that's
And
so
so,
good.
yeah, and so, it's this the way that we kind of win that game is to stop the deflection, right? We can kind of, what are they saying? Maybe our spouse is not communicating to us the right way. Maybe it's full of emotion or anger or whatever the case might be, but there's a good chance that what they're saying has some truth in it. So
Mm,
let's see if we can find that kind of nugget of truth, regardless of the affect, regardless of the way that they're coming at us. Can we find that nugget of truth and say, okay, I want to be made into the likeness of Jesus, right? And can I use this as an opportunity to do that? We
mm,
know that we are never more refined as we are in marriage, because there's somebody constantly kind of holding up a mirror to us in
yeah.
ways that we might never ever actually see. And so we can take that as an opportunity to reflect and
Mm,
to allow ourselves to be refined and sanctified, if we are willing to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions.
wow, that's so good. So good. And so then the second game that you talked about, which loved this game back in the day. And as you were sharing about it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is again how we go about in an unhealthy way of meeting those core needs of ours is let's make a deal, which I feel like the title itself kind of just like preaches the point, so to speak. So tell us a little bit about let's make a deal.
Yeah, right. So just that article's all, or that kind of a game is all about the this idea of how do I make a deal to get my needs met, right?
Mm,
How can I kind of compromise, or what can I do to get these needs met? And so it's this idea of like, I'll do this for you if you do this for me, right?
mm,
Or I'll compromise what I want so that you can be happy.
mm,
And it's not, and so we end up having these like ledgers in our relationships where we're like trying to like keep score,
mm,
right, of on both sides. Or a lot of times what happens is, um it can often be a dramatic imbalance to where one person is doing all of the compromising and the other person is asking all of the compromises, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
so there's this kind of like power imbalance in the relationship that is pretty unhealthy. And so, what I encourage couples to do in that section of the article is basically to like, let's have a conversation about what's the impact of this on our person, right? Like, how is your heart being affected by this? What is it like for you to constantly be compromising? What is it like for you to kind of be keeping this ledger in your mind? That's
mm,
not the unconditional love that we're called to have for each other, right?
mm,
And so, what I encourage people to do is to begin, if you're the person that's doing a lot of compromising and you're feeling just kind of like walked all over in the relationship, it's time to use your voice. It's time to start asserting your needs and saying that this is not okay and my needs are not being met and something's got to shift here. And oftentimes in a loving relationship, that's enough. But sometimes
yeah.
it's not. Sometimes one person asserting their voice, the other person, they can't hear it. They're not willing to compromise the power that they have in the relationship. And in that case, I recommend couples counseling. Come see us. Let us help you, in that kind of a situation, to regain the equality that there should
Mm.
be in a marriage.
That's so good, so practical. And the last game that you shared about and you pulled truths from is the game Jeopardy. Tell
Yes.
us about that.
Yeah, so Jeopardy was one of those, it was one of those shows that was on in my house every single night. Wheel of Fortune and Jeopardy, it was like my dad's
Yes.
favorite. And I've always been like enthralled with these contestants. I'm like, how do they know so much about so many random things? Like, who actually has that much knowledge? And so, but I was just thinking about, like, there's nothing more dramatic than that final Jeopardy round. You know, we all know the Jeopardy tune that starts playing. You can probably hear it in your
Yes.
head right now as we're talking about it. And like that final Jeopardy round where they're like sweating bullets, hoping they got the answer right, hoping they waged just enough money to win the game, you know? And then how many times have we seen it where it's like, oh, they were just like a couple dollars off or like $100 off from the contestant next to them and they end up not getting, you know, first place, right? And so I was thinking about how in our marriage, you know, and in marriages, we can have these kind of like, you know, the tension is so thick you can cut it with a knife kind of moments, right? Where it's
Mhm,
like,
mhm,
I have this hard question to ask or this hard conversation, or I need to confront them to with something, and it just doesn't feel good. It's hard. It's really,
mm,
really hard. And all of the resistance kind of rises up inside of us. And the resistance feels like tension, and you know, and it happens and it's like palpable, you know, like you can feel yourself sweating before the conversation even starts. And so whether you're the one having to ask the question or being asked the question, it feels so tense. And so again, we've got to find a different way. Nobody wins this game, right? And so we've got to find a different way. And what I recommend in this section in this of the article is that we one normalize hard conversations, right?
mm,
We have to just know that like that is part of a loving, thriving, healthy relationship. That there's hard conversations that need to be had and tough questions that we have to ask. And sometimes we have to be confronted with our stuff and know it doesn't feel good, but we all fall on the grace of God. And truly, what we desire is to be fully known, to fully know and to be fully known. And that can only happen if we are fully truthful. And so I
wow,
just
that's so
encourage
good.
everyone, yeah. So I just encourage us to lean into truth and honesty in those moments, allow ourselves to be kind of known and loved in our most vulnerable places.
Mm.
And then we kind of are able to inch our way towards this kind of unconditional love of God within our marriages.
Wow, that's so powerful and so, 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 so good. To be fully known is to be fully truthful. I need to write
Mhm.
that down and remember that. That is so, so good. So, my question for you, Tara, is why do so many married couples play these games so often?
Yeah, yeah. Wow, that's a great question. So I think that we play these games because oftentimes I don't think we know any other way. Life can be tough on a lot of us, and so we have learned what we would call in counseling like maladaptive methods. In other words, like all of these ways of going about getting these really good needs met in all of the wrong ways. Like we've learned we have to use power and we have to use control, we have to use manipulation and you know and compromise and blame shifting, and you know creating these tense moments to get what we want, to get what
Mhm,
we need, right? And so we play these games because we think it's the only way. And honestly, I also think a big piece of it is there's not enough healthy models in the world for us,
mm,
right? In order to like, what does it look like for us to get our needs met in a healthy way? Right.
yeah.
So many of us, it's like this is what we saw modeled in our homes growing up. This is what we've experienced in the world. And so it's just kind of, we just perpetuate what we've learned, what we've
Mm,
internalized from the world.
so, so, so insightful. So, what next step or advice would you give to a couple who wants to, again, take like that next step, that first step in
Mhm.
really ending playing these games with each other?
Yeah. Yeah, so it kind of depends on the game, but I think that, you know, kind of the common thread through all three of, you know, my recommendations in terms of playing these games um is to, you know, it all comes back to speak the truth in love, right? Speak the truth in love and but let your conversations always be seasoned with grace. And I think that like that's the scripture that I think that really kind of encompasses all of this is we have to speak, right? We have to speak, which too many times we let our voices be muted or compromised in relationships, right?
Mm,
We don't actually speak for our needs, we don't speak our feelings, we don't speak from our experience, we just stay quiet. So first we have to speak, and we have to do that with love and with grace. And so love both for the Lord, but love for ourselves and love for our spouse, right? So speak in the way that you want to be spoken to, right? And with gentleness and respect, right? But also in love, yes, for the spouse, but also for, like, the Lord tells us to guard our hearts, right? And if we're constantly, if we're constantly putting everyone else before ourselves, which is what we're told to do, then what
Mhm.
happens is at times people can take advantage of that, right? In an
Mhm.
ideal world, that would be reciprocal, right?
Mhm.
But that's not always what happens. And so we speak with love and with grace, and that grace and love are both for ourselves and for other,
Mm.
and for the Lord as well.
Mm. So, so good. Thank you. I really appreciate you sharing your heart and your passion and putting it on paper. And one thing that I do love about the title of the article is that it says part one. So I'm hopeful there's going to be a part two, maybe.
Yes, there's definitely going to be a part two, possibly even a part three. Yeah, there's lots of these kind of games came to mind as I started brainstorming for this article. So there will definitely be additional parts to it. Mhm.
Love it. That's so awesome. So awesome. Now, Tara, one thing that we do here on My Counselor Live is that we also get to share on a trending topic and get to hear what our clinical team thinks about these trending topics. So, this week's trending topic really does flow off of what you're talking about, and that is like really being known, being accepted, being received, living in true grace and love with someone. So, this week's trending topic is called social prescribing. Social prescribing. Can you explain to us what social prescribing is?
Yeah, so this is a topic where essentially doctors, medical providers are prescribing people going out and being more social, which makes so much sense as we're living in kind of Corona world with the
Mm,
pandemic having wreaked havoc on our relationships. That people are actually being prescribed having more of a social life.
that's so cool. And I think that's really ingenious in a lot of ways. So how can you see social prescribing being helpful for an individual?
Yeah, well, again, we are social bonding creatures. At our core, that is how the Lord created us. We are created for connection and relationships. And so we can't reflect if we're by ourselves. All the way from the time that we are babies, we only know ourselves to the degree that someone else reflects us back to ourselves, if that makes sense,
Mm,
right?
yeah.
So we are constantly holding up mirrors for one another. We kind of have a self-awareness based on the reflection that we get from other people, right? We know that we're funny because somebody laughs at our jokes, right?
Mhm,
We know that we're caring because someone has told us that, right? And so and that's true all the way kind of womb to tomb, right?
mhm,
And so it makes so much sense that this is good for us, right? So one, it aids in self-awareness. It helps us to in counseling we talk a lot about co-regulation. In other words, that means like our emotions, they get really really intense and overwhelming when we're in them by ourselves, and so we need another person to be able to like be with us in the emotion, be with us in the conversation. How many
mm,
times have we said, I just need to vent, right? Because there's something about talking about it with another person that's so powerful and so important. And
yeah.
so at the core, from biologically in our kind of neurobiology, we're created for relationships. So
Mm,
it makes so much sense to me that we become healthier the more known that we are, the more resources that we have, the more people that we can kind of bounce off of and reflect ourselves in.
mm.
Yeah, I mean, I could see there are so many far-reaching implications of social prescribing.
That's so cool. And so you did touch on a lot of them, like the co-regulation and things like that, but what are some of the benefits that social interaction, specifically during like a pandemic, post-COVID kind of world, we're kind of coming out of it, where social interaction may look different, but what are the benefits that we get to experience overall?
Yeah, yeah. So I think that, there's a lot of this is just like stress relief, right? It's
Mm,
just stress relief. So when I think about stress, which in our world we call it anxiety, right? That there's so much that happens when we are left to our own kind of devices, right?
yeah.
When there's not someone else to like correct our point of view or our thinking, right? We can just kind of stay in these spirals in our own heads,
Mm,
that are really unhealthy. And so when we're with other people, I think that if when we learn to trust in and find comfort in another, like I can see like levels of depression, decreasing, anxiety decreasing, right? Because it's not this, you don't have this I'm a terrible person, because there's someone in your life to speak truth to you, right?
mm,
I can see just, stress levels, like I said, just reducing, um, just so many things. I mean, just we're just not meant to be alone. We're,
yeah.
from the garden, right? Like, God created Eve for Adam because man was not meant to be alone,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that just what we love to say, undoing one another's aloneness, is
Mm,
so important, as we have kind of been pushed into our homes and into aloneness, into the social distancing kind of culture, for us to begin to like undo that, right? To
yeah.
come out of those spaces. And I don't care if it's on Zoom or 6 feet apart, or, like right next to one another. I think that we have to learn to be social again.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because, like you're saying, like at our core, we are created to be social beings. Like that is who God has designed us to be in relationship with Him and be in relationship with others. And I really think here we are now in the beginning of 2021, we're starting to see the implications of
Mhm.
what isolation does to people. I mean, we know the statistics that anxiety and depression and other mental health issues are on the rise. And I don't think that there's any accident or even much question that there's that correlation between not living in like community with people and the mental health issues. So that's so good. And I love just the practicality that you brought to that. Yeah. Zoom 6 feet apart or shoulder to shoulder, whatever you may be comfortable with, but it's so important to practice it and to undo some of the habits that we may have created over the last year.
That's right.
So good. Well, before we go, I do want to get to a couple of viewer question and answers. So, if you're listening or watching this video today, we do answer the questions that you submit to us. And so, you can submit any kind of question that you have for one of our clinical team members, and you can do that at MyCounselor.Online/ask. And we will answer those questions in a future episode of My Counselor Live. So, Tara, I have two different viewer questions for you. So, this is the first one. My
Mhm.
spouse commonly leaves the house and refuses to tell me where she is going. I don't have the courage to take any action or to get her to tell me where she is going. How can I get disclosure?
Hmm. Wow. Yeah, I think the first thing I think, my heart just sinks a little bit, for this viewer, because, or listener, because what a hard position that you're in, to feel like you just want truth and
Mm,
feeling really stuck. Yeah. And so I would say, that it is time, again, kind of like I've said, I heard you say that, I don't have the courage to do anything. Right. And so I would say that the first step in kind of like overcoming that piece, that kind of like, how do you muster courage? Like, how do we even get the courage to take a step? And I think that is to surround yourself with support, right? Undo
mm,
your own aloneness, right? By letting people into your world and able to support you in this, because you will feel stronger. I mean, how many times have we seen hashtag better together, right?
right,
In this
right.
last year, right? You need a support system for you to feel strong, for you to feel like you've got a spine and you can stand up for yourself. You need a support system, that can kind of anchor you, right? That can come around you. And so I would say that first, let some people into this. Let them be praying for you. Let
Mm,
them, be just kind of knowing your story, that this partner, your partner who's leaving and you don't know what that's about, they can't be your only source of support and have one foot out the door, right?
mm,
And so I just encourage, like, you have to have other people to support you in this process. And then I would say, second to that, that's got to be primary. That's got to be foundational, because you're not going to feel courage unless you have that support system. You're not going to feel strong enough to take a step or use your voice unless you have that. And so, secondly, I would say that it's time to use your voice, right? So first, it's you've got to say something, right? You've got to say something. You can't lay down about this for the rest of your life, because you will be miserable, and
Mm.
your spouse, will be also. And so first, you've got to say something. Again, speaking the truth in love and letting your all of your conversations be seasoned with grace is what the scriptures say, right? So you've got to speak. You've got to bring yourself to that place where you're saying, "Hey, I'm noticing that you're leaving a lot, and you're not giving me any reason for why you're leaving. I need some explanation here." Maybe let them know. Use these I statements, right? I statements can be very disarming. And so these I statements of, "I get really anxious when you leave and I don't know where you go. It's really hard for me. My mind goes to the worst possible places." Right. And so just kind of owning your own experience, right? Not a lot of blaming, not a lot of you or how dare you or, that kind of thing, but just kind of owning
Right.
your experience. And a person who cares about you should come close, and whenever you talk about that, if you can speak from that place of vulnerability, right? And then I would also say hold in tandem vulnerability and also keeping your guard up, because it may not feel safe. It may not be safe for you to be totally vulnerable yet, because I don't know where that person is. And so, yes, you kind of let them in to a certain extent, but also there's a bit of a guard that I would say, kind of allow that. The Lord tells us to guard our hearts, right? It's
Right.
the wellspring of life. And so I think that that's okay for you to kind of go into that conversation somewhat guarded,
Hmm.
and in terms of guarding your heart. And then the third piece of this, I would say, is boundaries. I highly, highly, highly recommend, and I work and I use this book a lot with a lot of my clients. Is Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud and Dr. John Townsend. Amazing book. But that, I would say, you have to start setting some boundaries. If this person is not willing to hear you and just listen to your voice alone, it's time to put some action behind the voice, and that is start setting some boundaries. There should be some consequences involved, right? If you're going to continue to do this, if you do this, this is what I have to do to take care of me, right?
Hmm.
So this is and use your power, use what's within your power, and for your life to do. You're not powerless in the situation. It might feel like it, but you're not. And so start allowing yourself to feel some of that power, that control, that you have over your own life.
Mm. Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you. So practical, so, so helpful. The next question that we have comes from an individual, and they say, "My husband watched pornography in the past, but I don't know if he still does. He is not interested in having sex with me. I always have to ask, what should I do?"
Mm, mhm. Yeah, another just painful, painful situation, right? Um, I would say that again, it's time for a conversation, right? Don't let yourself kind of live in that place of not knowing,
Mm.
because it's already wreaking havoc on your mental health, right? I'm hearing just kind of like the ruminating and the anxiety that you're living with, not knowing, is he doing this thing or is he not? And so I think asking the conversation, oftentimes it's very normal for couples to struggle to talk about their sex lives. And that's one of the very first things that we do as couples enter sex therapy with us, is to begin opening up this conversation. Um, so does he have low desire? And if he does have low desire, kind of where is that coming from? What's that stemming from? It might be pornography, but it might not. It's not
Mhm.
uncommon for a man's sex drive to change as they get older, to decrease as if they get older. And so, it's very possible that he's not using pornography, and that, it's just a decrease in drive. And that that could come from a whole variety of factors. What's
Mhm.
happening could be in the relationship. It could be something, happening physiologically in his body, right? So it's definitely worth investigating. And I would say it is worth it to you to overcome the silence,
Mm.
so that you guys can get this figured out.
Mm. Tara, you are a wealth of knowledge, and I so enjoy learning from you and watching you lead in this area. We know that there is a need for like couples counseling, Christian couples counseling, relationship counseling, and you haven't really dismissed that. You've like taken charge and you're like, I'm going to do something about it. And I'm going to bring about a service and a helping relationship that so many people need. I just want to say thank you for keeping the course and being a pioneer in an area that isn't always glamorous or easy, but an area that we all have need for assistance in. So thank you so much.
No, thank you, Anna. That means so much.
And thank you for being on today's episode. I know that if you're listening or watching today, whatever it may be, that you got some amazing nuggets of wisdom when it comes to your relationship with other beings, and maybe really seeing, okay, this is who God's designed me to be. How do I pursue healthy relationships in the days, weeks, months, and years to come in my life? So thank you so much for being a part of My Counselor Live today. It is such an honor to have you be a part of this community. I want to encourage you that if you do have a question for one of our clinical team members, we will answer those questions in episodes to come. Again, you can submit those questions at MyCounselor.Online/ask. You can also subscribe to us on a plethora of social media channels. First of all, you can find us on Facebook, facebook.com/lovemycounselor. You can find us on Instagram. Our Instagram handle is lovemycounselor. And then last but not least, where you can find a lot of these different videos on MyCounselorLIVE and different conversations our clinical team has, and that is youtube.com/MyCounselorOnline Christian Counseling. Again, thank you so much for being a part of this episode, Tara. I know that it was a blessing to many. And thank you so much, listener, watcher, whatever way that you are coming into My Counselor Live. We are so honored that you are here today. We believe in you and we are in your corner, and we will see you next week.